This tale, The Inconsiderate Gardener, was first told on a mountainside in southern France. We must become a shadow. We must silence the relentless noise inside our own heads. We must become deeply quiet, able to receive the wisdom of ancient secrets. We must do this to expand our own consciousness, to become open, receptive. Let's begin by taking control of our breathing. In through your nose, draw a deep, cleansing breath. Exhale through your mouth slowly. Focus totally on the process of steady inhalation and exhalation. Continue breathing thoughtfully. Fill your lungs generously. Hold it a few comfortable seconds. And exhale slowly through your mouth. Feel yourself relax as you do so. Release all your restless worries, frustrations, and fears that rob you of your peace. Allow the heavy burden of your reality to fade away. Become amorphous, a shadow, a thin, flat, effective light attached by fate, the ever-present companion of a young, untrained, inexperienced apprentice gardener. At his pace, we will go where he goes. We will view the world from his eyes, and for good or ill, we will experience the emotions of his very being. The calendar says May, but winter clings still to gusty breezes and to the shady edges of the hedgerows. Last year's branches, barren for months, are newly tinged with green. It is only a short while after dawn. Dewdrops veil all vegetation. Birds answer one another from the tops of fruit trees just beginning to bud. Our apprentice takes a shortcut along a well-worn brick path which divides a huge, carefully tended, long-established kitchen garden into an efficient grid designed to facilitate maintenance and labeling of sections and to separate incompatible plants from one another. Garlics and onions away from peas and beans, anise and dill apart from carrots, mustards and cabbages distant from strawberries, and mints, notorious wanders, away from everything else and strictly contained lest they take over space not specifically reserved for them. Our apprentice finds the discipline of the structured garden very comforting. He inhales springtime like medicine to heal the ravages of the slow, frigid winter just past. The lusty smell of loamy, recently thawed soil is to him every bit as sensually pleasing as the dainty perfumes of just opened flowers emerging here and there. Hired only last week, our apprentice considers himself fortunate indeed, as he anticipates the satisfaction to be derived from his own contribution to bringing about the exuberant palette of colors, textures, scents, and flavors that summer will bestow upon this brick-bordered bed. Greens and grays of basil, rosemary, and sage. The golds, oranges, and reds of yarrow, calendula, marigold, and tansy. Herby, useful flowers, irresistible to buzzing, sun-warmed honeybees, hived in protected stacks up on the high ridge above the palace where he is heading. But before he begins his climb to the mountaintop, our apprentice stops first at a sturdy shed at the far end of the sheltered garden. He produces a key from a leather lace hung about his neck. He is pleased to hold this key. It is a sign of trust in him, of his honesty and his sense of responsibility, qualities among others which he values and tries to develop within himself, partially by deliberately avoiding companions who have proven themselves otherwise. Inside the dimly lit shed, his eyes take a minute to adjust before he can locate his tools he will need to do the job assigned to him only yesterday by the head gardener, his master and mentor. He is to restore order, inside and out, to a wee cottage situated on a plateau above the palace, a lonely spot, a mile or two uphill, close to where the bees live. The cottage, built as a shepherd's shelter, is to be used again this year as special accommodation for a cleric who wishes for solitude, but not discomfort, during festival season. Our apprentice assembles his clean, oil-coated tools. A rake, a hoe, a narrow-pointed shovel, a claw, a watering can, a thresher, a limb saw, a few woodworking tools, some twine, some thick leather gloves, a few fasteners, and other miscellany better to have on site than to require fetching. Cautiously, our apprentice locks the shed and tucks the smaller tools in his pack carefully so his lunch is unlikely to be crushed. He lashes the long-handled tools together so he can manage them better against his shoulders. He slips behind a shrub into a narrow space behind the shed and out through a heavy door hidden in the castle's outer fortification wall on the cliff side of the mountain. Our apprentice draws a resolute breath and exhales purposefully as he begins his steep ascent along the dangerously narrow, unstable, stony path parallel to the man-made high fortress wall, which, for some distance before the sheer rock of the mountainside itself, walls off the left side of a precarious track. Here it ends as our apprentice climbs ever higher. He struggles to draw even shallow breaths under the weight of the burden he carries. The tool bundle scrapes against the mountain wall if he doesn't balance it as straight as possible against his own body. It pinches the spot where his neck and shoulder meet. He chooses distant benchmarks along the trail, a curve in the path, an outcropping or a cliff-hugging shrub, and wills himself to carry the bundle at least that far before shifting it to the other shoulder, a process that requires him to stop entirely because the track is so narrow and the drop-off is so terrifying. He needs to be extremely cautious. When the small tools in his pack begin jabbing his ribs, the cumulative pain is almost intolerable. But our apprentice presses on. He tries to focus his whole attention on the glorious vista spread before him across the gorge, instead of on all the physical discomforts assailing him, as at last he mounts the ridge. Overheated from exertion, he sighs a prayer of thanksgiving for his safe arrival as he passes through a wooden gate, aged silver by time and harsh elements, that is set within the arch of a similarly grayed arbor, still tight and festooned with this spring's first tendrils of green. Clematis, he guesses, and anticipates with pleasure saucer-sized blossoms of rich purple before the festival of St. John in June. The dooryard is encircled by a rubble fence just high enough to keep a small flock of sheep during shearing season. The lonely, stone-built, centuries-old shepherd's cottage itself is small and square and cloaked with a vigorous but untidy grapevine sprawling across its full face, and trained also to stretch out over a rustic, split-tree branch-framed pergola, intended to provide necessary shade during the broiling months on this high, wind-swept meadow. Our apprentice unlashes the collection of large tools, selects the thresher, and begins immediately to clear an efficient path through the weave of overgrown, hay-like grasses from the arbor gate directly to the door of the long-neglected, vine-covered dwelling. He lifts the fob from the neck of his linen tunic and produces another key. It fits well enough in the rusty lock, but the mechanism is stubborn. He jiggles the key until he hears a meaningful click. He depresses the thumb latch and pulls the door towards himself to enter. The door, however, can't be swung sufficiently open to admit him, because a woody, low-slung branch of the vine has draped itself over the top quarter of the portal. Our apprentice has been instructed to make entry, to assess and perhaps begin the process of setting all to rights, inside as well as outside. His first general impression of the exterior suggests this whole project will be a lot of strenuous work that will take a few days, if not a week, to complete. But at the moment, our apprentice is still tired from the hike to the mountaintop. The blocked doorway is an annoying extra hassle. He grabs his extremely sharp limb saw and slices through the offending branch in less than 5 minutes. Problem solved. He yanks the hacked-off section of vine off to the side and braces the now free-functioning door wide open to allow bats or birds residing in the darkened room to fly out before he goes in to check out the state of things inside. Though no winged creatures have launched a hasty escape, he proceeds slowly because the closed-up room is so completely dark. It smells musty and very mousy. He makes his way over to where 2 little windows are positioned in the foot-thick front walls. He unshutters them and props them wide. He can at least start airing out the space while he is working on site. Our apprentice sees now that every surface wears a thick coat of dust. Dirty cobwebs dangle like hammocks from all the ceiling rafters. It will be especially challenging to clear them from the top corners and the center ridge of the roofline. The floor is sheathed with plain, earth-toned, handcrafted tiles. It is littered with bluster-blown dry leaves and chalky white stains where water has leaked in and dried in splotchy puddles. Chewed open acorns, nuts, and seeds along the edges of the room were left there by small animals who squirmed their way inside through narrow crevices where ancient mortar has failed over time between the irregularly shaped, laid-up rocks that form the structure of the walls. Who knows what other damage they have caused, simply by living according to the habits of their kind. This is too much work to start indoors today, our apprentice declares aloud as he heads back out into the fresh morning. He begins salvaging a strip of flower garden from a stubbly tangle of particularly prickly weeds, the sort which ensnare themselves in the flesh, fur, and fabric of all passers-by. He is glad for his leather gloves after he is forced to halt his work to remove a needle-like barb from the fibers of his sleeves. Our apprentice toils on, pulling clump after clump, shaking soil from weedy root balls, and dumping armfuls over the cliffside rock fence. Birds sing, bees hum, the morning glows. Though all the stooping has put a kink in his young back, and sweat drips from his brow, he will persist. He is encouraged now and then by a happy surprise. Survivors from a long-forgotten kitchen garden emerge from the clutter. Blue star-flowered borage, a shaggy cluster of chives, and daisy-headed chamomile. These he separates tenderly from the undesirables and replants sensibly. Taller varieties toward the back, shorter, neater ones along the edge of the path which rings the cottage. Our apprentice takes a break at midday. Except for his aching back and a sliver in the tip of his index finger, he is quite pleased with his efforts so far. He gulps an immodest draught of water from a boda skin and lets the excess drip down his chin and neck refreshingly. He stuffs a chunk of cheese into his mouth and eases his tired self down onto a rather low bench close to the arbor gate along the stone wall. He bites off an unmannerly chew of crusty bread and washes it down with another swallow of water before he actually surveys the visual progress of his landscaping. The improved state of general tidiness barely registers in his mind as his gaze fixes on an absolutely dreadful problem he instantly knows is of his own making. He gasps as he realizes that in his zeal to make quick work of the frustratingly unopenable door, he has severed the main artery branch feeding the entire right side of the vine, which had only a few short hours ago so picturesquely embraced the whole front of the ancient dwelling. The left side will continue to be lush, bright green, but by contrast, the right side will now be stark, blank, and empty. Unbalanced, at least until the main vine sends out new runners. Time and sunshine work their magic. apprentice never meant to destroy such a huge portion of the grapevine. He intended only to remedy the problem of the inconveniently blocked doorway. A small problem, but a serious mistake. Our apprentice now dreads having the head gardener see what he has done. All his judicious trimming and careful weeding are nothing compared to the glaring destruction of half of the pretty vine. And he hadn't even noticed the horribly drooping vine until just now. Our apprentice stows the rest of his bread and cheese back in his pack. His stomach is in knots. He knows he should pull the doomed vine away from the face of the cottage, but the thought sickens him. He sits dejectedly through the dazzling beauty of nature, dances all around him. He knows he cannot undo the devastation he has wrought. And he expects the head gardener, who is known for fastidiously high standards, will probably dismiss him on the spot. He has prayed God would spare him from the fate of his forefathers. Generations of his ancestors who work in the mines, whole lifetimes spent in soul-crushing darkness, for barely enough money to put food on the table. Our apprentice had been so grateful for this chance to live in the light, to actually help living things grow. He wonders how God can be so cruel as to let him believe it was ever possible for him to have a different fate than that of most of the men he has ever known, only to have that possibility snatched away from him because of a moment's stupidity. Our apprentice tries to resign himself to the certainty of joining his beloved grimy ones, as they call the brotherhood of those who spend from dawn to dusk underground, buried alive for the rest of his mercifully short, useful years. He knows that for him, the dismal reality of the mines will be worse than it is for the sons who followed fathers willingly into the deep void below. Worse for him, because this single morning he toiled not in the underworld, but here on this blessed mountaintop in the sunlight. Our apprentice wipes away a silent flood of tears. Still grateful in the depths of his sorrow, he speaks to the sky. At least I have had this day. He stands up and returns to work, having decided to spend the scant hours remaining before the inevitable confrontation with the head gardener, creating the broadest possible appearance of order. Feverishly he threshes the rest of the high grass within the fenced dooryard and rakes up and disposes of the mess. He gathers random twigs and sticks into a kindling pile. He clears away snarls of weeds from the base of the house on all four sides. Our apprentice comes across a rickety trellis dashed to the ground during some wicked windstorm. He carefully stands it upright, reinforces the loose joints, and then gently trims and braces to its frame a thorny, old-fashioned rosebush with blush pink, sweetly fragrant blossoms that are just beginning to open. It is a miracle it has survived months and months in an undignified heap, shrouded by all manner of choking weeds. As the head gardener passes through the gated arbor, He smiles approvingly as he catches the lingering clovey scent of that same rosebush, which he himself has lovingly tended for a very long time. Its perfume is a pleasant reward at the end of the arduous hike to the summit, which has become much more physically taxing with his advancing age. The head gardener is pleased also with the amount of work his new apprentice has been able to accomplish on this first day. He is just about to praise the young man's triumph over chaos when his eyes behold the death of the dexter side of the vine. He walks quickly to the cottage doorway and instantly determines what has happened. He looks about for his apprentice and finds him sitting on the ground in the corner of the fence wall, fidgeting guiltily. "Do you see your error?" the master quizzes his pupil. "Tell me what you now understand that you didn't realize this morning, or ever before," he demands in an unsympathetic tone. "I cut an unruly branch which was impeding the function of the door." The junior gardener dodged the real question. He tried to sound as logical and professional as possible, hoping to convey the practicality of his action. "What is the result of your having done that?" the master probed further. "Well, it is as you see now. The branch connecting the right side of the vine has been cut, but now the entrance door can be pulled outward to an open position." Our apprentice answers matter-of-factly, without apology. "Go now as quickly as possible and remove the severed vine from the face of the cottage. Carry it to the cliffside and toss it over. Be careful of your safety as you do so. When you are finished, return to me. I shall be resting on the bench." The old gardener's tone seems much more exasperated than before. Unhurriedly, oh, so slowly, our apprentice carries out his master's orders. He hopes the old man, who has, after all, just climbed the steep mountain path, will fall asleep as he sits in the dappled sunlight upon the rough bench against the stone wall. Our apprentice reasons that delaying further confrontation will be beneficial. He plans to tiptoe past the dozing old man and take himself down the mountain and home. Perhaps after a cooling off period, a hot meal and a good night's sleep, the master gardener will change his mind about sacking him. Tomorrow, then, or maybe the next day, they can get on with the springtime chores as if he hadn't made the mistake of killing half of the charming vine. On the other hand, if the master dismisses him this evening back in town, at least it will be quick, not this excruciatingly drawn-out inquisition. Our apprentice turns his 15-minute task into one consuming a full half-hour by snapping sections of vine into unnecessarily small lengths before heaving it over the cliff, as his master had indicated. Surely by now, sleep must have overtaken the straw-hatted old gentleman. Our apprentice ventures a glance in that direction and is dismayed to realize that the head gardener is not just awake, but is now visibly annoyed, even agitated, by his diversions and delays. "So how does the cottage appear now?" the elder called across the yard to the younger, who was overly fastidious in collecting a few remaining small, stray, wilted leaves from the dooryard. Our apprentice answers truthfully. It looks lopsided because all the greenery is on the left side. The right side looks blank and naked, except I did uncover just now a very interesting clay sundial mounted about half the distance between the top of the window and the roof. Master Gardener continues his interrogation. Did you discover anything else on that side of the door? Yes, I think a clematis vine like the one on the arbor, if that's what it is. The clematis started to come off the wall when I pulled away the first large branch of wilted vine, but I stopped as soon as I noticed it. I'm sure it will anchor itself again in a few days. I'm glad I saw it before I ripped it completely off along with the dead grape. His tone was far less aggressively defensive than before. Do you now understand the mistake you made this morning? The elderly man coaxed a resolution from the younger. Yes, of course. I should not have cut that vine. A note of frustration remains evident in the old man's voice, made raspy by the exertions of the afternoon. The seasoned gardener remains insistent. Your mistake is far more serious than severing a main artery vine, my son. Your error is compounded by your total failure, even now, to understand that the vine is alive. In a garden, as in the world generally, you are managing living things, from the most vexatious, intrusive weeds to elegant roses, even to rambling and overly vigorous grapevines. Your heart and your mind must consider fully every knowable potential outcome of the work of your hands. You must act always to safeguard the life under your dominion. Wielding the blade is never a wise first choice. Humbled now, our apprentice understands the old gentleman's wisdom. I apologize for my short-sightedness. I considered only the problem of the obstructed door, nothing more than that. I acted without appreciating, even slightly, how interconnected it all is. I hope you will forgive me. Of course I will forgive you. That is, if you are willing to learn from the mistakes you make. We must all do that continually, continued the chief gardener with fatherly gentleness. And to demonstrate my willingness to help you advance your understanding, I will help you carry this bench from here over to the place beneath the window on the bare side of the cottage, and we will flank the bench with a few pots of colorful flowers to diminish the lack of balance in the appearance of this safe little place until the grapevine stretches over once again. Tears fill the eyes of our apprentice. He knows he is welcome to stay in the employ of this wise old gardener, that the sickening gloom of the mines will not engulf his future, that his prayer has touched the heart of God. Thank you ever so much, Master. I am so grateful for your kindness towards me. The old man interrupts him. Let me show you some hidden hooks you might have used to anchor the right feeder vine once you had carefully repositioned it out of the doorway's functional area. Our apprentice instantly grasps the import of what the skilled gardener is saying. He answers with surprise and confusion. You mean this has been a problem before? Bemused, the old man answers kindly. Of course it has. Stunned by such a simple but profound answer, our apprentice wonders aloud, then why didn't you warn me? And deprive you of a soul-deep understanding of the power you wield with a blade? Never, I could have told you tales or given you a list of instructions, but now you yourself have experienced the tragedy of unintended consequence caused by your own hasty action. Now you are someone with whom I can work. Now you belong in the garden. Our apprentice is too stunned to speak as the old gentleman continues. Remember always, wielding a blade is seldom a wise first choice. Good gardeners would make good kings.